Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to take a look how to make terrain out of an image. Most of the time, if you're going to be stuck making a model that would require a terrain, you would probably get an image looking something like this. Well, not exactly like this, because basically this is an image from isohypsis for a river depth, but it's basically going to be similar to this, as you're gonna get either your house or your model that you're supposed to like model, and then you're gonna get a terrain with lines flowing like this. So how do you make heads or tails, and what you want to make from an image like this? Well, if you're gonna look at an image like this, you're gonna notice that all of these lines usually have a number going alongside with them. In this case, since it's a depth map, the numbers are in a negative, as you can see, minus 35, minus 30, 25, 5, and so on. So usually isohypsis, or these lines that you see, they're used to basically show you how, what kind of terrain you're looking at, and usually they are measured in differences of like 1 meter or 5 meters or 10 meters or 20 or 50 or 100, depending on the scale of your scene or on the image you will need to make. So in this case, we have depths of minus 50 going up to, like, from what I can see around here, minus 5. So here we got about 50 meters. So how do we start with this? Well, we're gonna start off by trying to draw on these lines. So we're gonna go over in the Create tab, go over in the Shapes, and choose a line. Also, you can just hold down Control and right click, and you're gonna get the creation methods for the primitives. You can choose the line from here. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go over and start from the bottom. So from the minus 50. So just click. You don't have to be overly accurate here. Just try and get it to be near from what you're seeing. It's gonna ask if you want to close the spline. Click yes. And now this is one continuous spline. For the next one is the minus 45. I'm gonna start a new line and make sure you have start new shape ticked on over here, because if this is ticked off, you're simply gonna continue making this line. We want a new line, so tick it off, so it's a start new shape, and we're gonna start from here. So something like this. Click, click. Just try to follow the shape as roughly as possible. Let's do around here, then we click, right click again, make a new line. In this case, we don't have the full map, so that's why when I get near the edge, I stop. So, okay, there we go. Again, like I said, don't worry if you deviate from the lines, as we can fix it later on. We just want to get the rough shapes in. So again, for the 35, make sure you have it in like this. And now we're gonna have to guesstimate a bit, but screw it, let's just go like this. Again. We're gonna go over here. Just make sure that you have all the minus 30 following. Now, the 25, something like this, starting from here. And till around here. There we go. Now the minus 20. And as you can see, I'm following the lines as their height Okay, something like this. It's shown. So first off, I started from the deepest one, the -50, then proceeded to the shallower ones, and this is the -20. Awesome. Over here. Now, I just noticed something, that while I was making the -25, it's on the outer edge, but if you look, just finish this one. Something, It does take some time, so bear with me. All right. This is the -25, but if you look at it over here, you have another -25, and over here you have another -25. So in order to encompass those as well, turn off the start new shape now. So click on the line, and once you start clicking here, you are basically drawing on the line that's defined on -25, which is this line. So these two are the same spline now. So let's just go ahead and make this one. Something like this. There we go. And now this inside could be the -20, but I'm just gonna leave it because it's not really that important for this portion. And now if you see, if I moved just this line, both of those move with it. So again, start the new shape, click on the start new shape line. I just want to add a few more that are going to define this terrain. Okay. There we go. Like I said, I don't have to worry about being overly accurate here. And just, okay, let's go with the -10, and we're gonna finish it off and move over to getting this refined and looking nice. I just cut it over here. All right, so if we look at it from the side, we're gonna notice that we have a bunch of lines. Now, how do we make these lines into an actual terrain that we can use in 3D? Well, the first way will be to just not deviate from max or the standard tools that come with max. But before we do that, let's just make sure that all of these lines have the correct depth. So I'm going to select the one in the center that says -50. I'm going to right click on my move button over here, select the move, and it gives me the absolute world coordinates for it. Now I want to make sure that in the Z axis, as you can see here, Z is pointing up, which means if I put a positive value here, this line is going to move upwards. If I put a negative one, it's going to move the opposite way from where this is pointing up. Since this is pointing up, if I put a negative, it's going to go down. So I'm going to go -50. In my case, it's set up in centimeters, which is not the exact depth that this thing is. This is probably in meters, but since we're working in a scale in centimeters, it's going to be correct. All right, now go to the second one. This one is, if I'm not mistaken, yep, this is the -45. So again, -45, not 40, 45. The next one, which is this one, is going to be -40, followed by this, -35, -30. And as you can see, all the lines that we made, we're just positioning them at the right height. Okay. This one makes it so it's -20, -25, Oh, and one other thing. When you're moving these lines down, make sure that you're on your perspective viewport, because depending on which viewport you're in, for example, if I want to move this line downwards while I'm in the front viewport, I'm not going to be using the Z axis. I'm going to have to be using the Y axis. So if you can notice, every time I'm moving it downwards, I make sure my perspective is active. So this was minus, no, this is supposed to be minus 15. There we go. I have the minus 10. All right, so this is what we are left with. Now we have some lines at a different elevation. So in the next step, we want to make this into an actual terrain. Now, Max comes pre-loaded with that option. So all we got to do is go into the extended, or actually the compound objects over here. And here you're going to see that we have one option that's kind of faded out right now. It's blacked out. But once I select a line, I can choose it as a terrain. Now, very important, before you do this, I'm just going to copy one. Copy. Hide the selection. All right. Before you click on the terrain button, make sure that you have selected the most or the highest line that you have in the terrain that you want to make. So in this case, it's this one, because as soon as I click on the terrain, this is what's going to happen. We're going to get a plane like this. If I press F4 to show me the faces, the edged faces, you're going to see that it's all broken up like this, but it's okay. It's not a problem. Don't worry. So what you want to do right now is go down and click on this button where it says pick operand. Now this is very important. When you're clicking the operand, always try to click from the top going towards the bottom. So click on this one, then followed by the one beneath it, and this one, this one, this one, all the way to the bottom, something like this. And we have something looking like this. So far, not a pretty sight, very garbled. Let's see how we can clean this up. Over here, right click, convert to an editable poly. All right, so we have something resembling a terrain made from those lines. But from what we can see here, it's pretty jagged. So how do we get this to look better? Well, the first thing is that we can use the lines that we made this terrain. Just let me delete this, unhide all. Okay. I can use these lines and basically select them, something like this. Press the vertex selection, Control A to select all the vertices, right click, and I can make him a Bezier corner, like this. With the Bezier corner, I can now move these handles around and make the line more rounded or less jagged, something like this. That's going to give me a much better control over how I want my terrain to look like, as you can see. There you go, but actually that was not the greatest line to show this, but still. Alright, I'm going to try with this one. Control A to select all the vertices, right click, Bezier corner, and now I can just simply do this and get the terrain flowing better. There we go, something like this. The great thing here is that if you are missing a point somewhere to get a better control over the terrain that you made, you can always just refine this by going to the refine and add an extra vertice. There we go. Something like this. And there we go. Now these lines, or actually these isohypses, are following the terrain much closer, and it should give us a better result. Something like this. All right. Just a few more, and yeah. All right. This should work better now. Okay. Awesome. All right, and isolate. So again, we're gonna do the same thing. Start from the top, terrain, and go lower. Pick operands, lower, lower, lower. Okay, so now we got more. We got this terrain to follow this closer. Now, again, it still looks like it's too jagged. So let's see how to fix that issue. Again, I'm going to convert it to an editable poly. And this time around, I'm going to isolate it by Alt-Q. And this is what I have so far. So I'm going to select my border over here. Or before we do that, I just want to show you how this would look if I just throw in a turbo smooth, because turbo smooth always makes all the geometry to be quads. So if I put turbo smooth, you're gonna notice that this is starting to look better, or well, not better, but resemble terrain closer, something like this. So if I put it with 2 iterations, it's starting to look better. And it's starting to look more realistic as to what a terrain would look like, especially for a river bottom. Now, the problem with this would be that this geometry is not the optimal geometry to work with. So let's see how we can get this to work better. So select the border, go into the scale, hold down Shift, and drag out one line like this. It doesn't matter if it looks wonky like this, it's okay. It's supposed to look like this. With a turbo smooth, it's gonna look something like this. So let's see how we can make this geometry to be with very nice quadded geometry. So what we want to do is go over here, make sure it's shaded. And now in the create plane over here, go into standard primitives, choose a plane. And now with this plane, just draw out where you would like to have your terrain. Let's just say this part over here, something like this. So everything that's covering this area is going to be our terrain that we want to use. Now, this is the important part. Before we do anything else, we want to make sure that this this plane has enough segments, so once we do what we're going to do, we have enough geometry to work with. So when I say enough, we can go with 50 by 50 to get something like this. There we go. Or we can go even higher, something like 100 by 100, which I think in this case would be better. So what we want to do now is project this plane onto this terrain we have here. The way to do this is, again, with a tool that's inside 3ds Max. So go over in the compound objects, go over to, there we go, conform over here. And this is the important part. Click on hide wrap through object and make sure that you are in the top viewport, or at least the viewport in which you made this, because once I click this pick wrap to object, it's going to project it from where I'm looking at. So if I do this while I'm in the perspective viewport, it's gonna get all wrong. So I'm gonna get a very wrong results. Make sure that you are in the top viewport when you are doing this for terrains. So pick wrap to object and click on the terrain. This is what's gonna happen. Give it a minute, or actually give it a few seconds. It's gonna do the calculations, and it's gonna conform over down to the terrain. So now I can delete the bottom one, the one that we used to make the splines. And there we go. We got all nice quoted terrain in 3ds Max without having to go into an outside program, by just using a few simple splines. Now, this was one of the ways to do this. I want to show you one more trick, or not a trick, but this other way of making this. So in order to make the other way, so this is the first one, I'm just gonna move it around like this. For the second way of making this, we're gonna have to utilize a plugin called Splineland. And this is a good plugin if you're always into the business of working with terrain. And this is what it does. In order for this to work, we're gonna have to have one continuous spline. So right click on this, convert it to an editable spline, and attach it with all the rest of the splines. There we go, downwards. There you go. So all of these are now one continuous spline. All right, so go over, choose the Splineland, click anywhere. You're gonna get something like this. So in the modify, you have splines. So click on the add object and select the spline. Once you have this selected, all you gotta do here is click on the generate surface. It's gonna do the calculations again, as you can see it over here. And in a second, we're gonna get the result. There we go. As you can see, we got a nice result, something resembling like we got from Max directly. But as you can see, it's really trying to find how these lines are moving. So if we had better defined lines, we would have gotten a much better result. Now, one of the strong points of Splineland is that it can make platforms. So for example, if this was a hillside and you needed to make, let's say, some kind of a building over here, or anywhere for that matter, all you would have to do is get over here, make a plane. So let's call this the base for the house, or something like this. We don't need so many segments. In the viewport, I'm going to move this downwards, something like this. As you can see, it's intersecting with the terrain, which is exactly what we want. So I'm gonna go ahead in the modify pane, click on platforms. Where it says platforms, click on add object, click on this plane, and now it took the plane into account. So now when I click generate surface, this is what's gonna happen. It's gonna take all of this information calculation, and look what happens here. There we go. We tried to square off this portion, so exactly where this plane was sitting at, now we have a very flat surface on which we can place our house or our building or whatever we need to have at this exact location. So I hope you guys liked this video and you managed to learn something. And also, if you would like me to make more, like it, subscribe, comment, and share it around so it can reach more people. So take care and see you in the next video.